Sega has a real treasure trove of IPs that have just remained dormant for years. Wild ideas and concepts that are uniquely Sega in tone. Back when Sega had their own consoles to make games for, and in the immediate aftermath of the Dreamcast's failure, Sega's output was very different than it is today. Now they're just rotating between a small handful of series to make games for, while their parent company makes pachinko machines like nobody's business. Instead, they had a continuous stream of games coming out that were just so different. They found really fun ways to push the envelope. And a lot of other games made for their systems would have similar vibes, giving Sega consoles their special charm, like the consoles had character through their libraries. One of those series being Rent a Hero, originally released in 1991 for the Mega Drive in Japan and nowhere else. So I'm playing a fan translation that I've linked the patch to below. Rent a Hero was developed by Sega's AM2 division, known for bangers like Virtua Fighter and Daytona USA. With Yu Suzuki and Keiji Okayasu being involved, it shouldn't be too surprising that this game was really experimental for the time, especially considering that they would go on to create Shenmue. Rent a Hero clearly has a very Western comic book inspired look, which makes it weirder that we didn't get it in the West. The manual has some really fun art, including images of the protagonist Taro showing what not to do with your Mega Drive cartridge. The game opens up with Taro and his family having a party where the neighbors and friends are invited. Your dad tells you to order some food for delivery because one of the guests is eating more than they anticipated. So you order something from the sensational cafeteria, or Seika for short. But it turns out they had just started a Rent a Hero program, where you rent a suit with superpowers, and they assume that's why you called. So you get the super suit and you go show your dad. He's all dressed up trying to entertain the guests, and you decide to have a silly little sparring match with him, for the fun of it. But the suit's a bit stronger than expected. You kinda knock him the fuck out. Later, a delivery person drops by to tell you that you gotta pay a fee to the bank for the suit, otherwise it'll be confiscated until you pay. And the suit also runs on electricity, so you gotta keep buying double A's for it to run. And the game begins with you exploring your hometown and taking on crime or helping citizens with requests. Some people just want to try to fight you in the suit for the fun of it, and offer to pay you if you beat them. The game has a very silly vibe to it, with a lot of funny and weird conversations. I also have to give myself a superhero name, so I went with Wah! One thing I will complain about, at least at the start of the game, you need batteries all the time, and you can't buy them in bulk, and it takes a while to buy more of one type of item. So you just have to press yes, and then you have to go through the same dialogue again and again, and it's just like, ugh. And when you're not in the suit, you walk real slow, but it's kind of worth it to save money on batteries. But then again, if you take more time to do stuff, your rent will be due sooner, and that'll cost you more, and you have to walk to a bank to pay it, so you take on jobs, from silly stuff like delivering food or love letters to more serious stuff like taking money from one bank to another or being someone's bodyguard. Whenever you take on opponents, you get these side view combat sections. It does not feel good, and the hit detection is just really off. I ended up just walking towards the enemies and spamming punches that seem to work most of the time. You can do super attacks, but it drains your power real fast, so walking and punching remain my go-to. If you lose, you get sent to a hospital and you have to pay fees, but some missions have harsher punishments for defeat. Like if you lose while carrying money to the bank, they'll lose the money and get mad at you. As you get further in, there are giant robots and mobsters and all kinds of stuff going on. But honestly, I wish the game was a little more open-ended. That's kind of what I was hoping for when the game started, but it's fairly linear. You just go home, accept a mission, go out and do it while keeping your batteries up and fees paid for, and eventually enemies will just randomly challenge you while you're out in the streets, and with the combat being so dog shit, it's just not really a fun experience. This game was the second Mega Drive title by AM2. The first is Sword of Vermilion, which is why you can find that game's soundtrack bundled with Rent a Heroes. This game is alright. It's very ambitious. If you don't mind some repetition and tedium, then it's a really weird and interesting experience, and it takes some wild turns, and it gets more serious as it goes on. But that being said, I found myself getting burned out after just like an hour and a half. You have to pay rental fees so often, it's just so annoying, and dealing with the batteries, and with how long it takes to use items, it just gets really annoying really fast. It's a charming game and it's very ahead of its time. I admire a lot of things about it, but I just don't think it's that enjoyable. I don't really recommend it, but if you think it looks interesting and you're very patient, then maybe give it a try. The next stop is actually on the Sega Saturn with Fighters Mega Mix. We have Taro, the protagonist, appearing as a playable character, alongside many other Sega and AM2 characters. This game is just a wild crossover where they just threw together a bunch of fighting games with some fun extras, and they just made it into a goofy and fun experience. There isn't really a story to this game, but the roster is pretty big, especially for its time. If you're a fan of Sega franchises in the 90s, this will give you plenty of cool stuff to mess around with, and having Rent-A-Hero represented for the first time in 3D is pretty dope. After this game, we would see Rent-A-Hero's protagonist make a small cameo in Shenmue as a capsule toy, which I really like. These capsule toys are so charming, and I'm glad the protagonist made another appearance. And after Shenmue, we would get a full-on remake in the year 2000 for the Sega Dreamcast. 9 years after the original game, this 3D reimagining came out, and this time it was developed by Aspect Digital Entertainment. Their first game was a Golden Axe spin-off for the Game Gear. In fact, Game Gear and Master System were their go-to consoles for a long time. They developed games for Sega like Tails Adventure, and would also supply sound effects for the Fatal Fury games. I also have to mention Coca-Cola Kid, which was released alongside a Coca-Cola themed Game Gear. That's something they worked on. So let's see how they handled Rent-A-Hero. I want to start with looking at the back of the box, because they have this cute little comic thing showing the premise and tone of the game. Me and my friend Ascent voiced this comic together, so I hope you enjoy it. I also linked her Tumblr below if you want to check it out.
Help me! You should call Rent-A-Hero if you need help. The price is very reasonable.
Okay, I'm coming right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rent-A-Hero! Try Rent-A-Hero if you're ever in trouble.
Such a charming thing to have on the back of the box. I appreciate the effort. The manual also has a bunch of little comics explaining how to start the game, save, transform, fight, and more. There's many fun drawings and even little advertisements for in-game items like the batteries you buy at the stores. The game begins just like the original. You've just moved into a new town and your family are having a housewarming party. Once you've talked to everyone, Baron ends up eating too much food, so you gotta order more. And just like before, your dad gets in costume to entertain the guests, while you get the suit from the cafe. This time it's just called the Service Cafe, but they still call it Seika for short. You can change anytime just by pressing the X button, so you don't need to open a menu now. And he does a little pose every time he gets in costume. You try to play fight with your dad to entertain the guests, and just like before, you knock him the fuck out. And after that, you get this banging intro. It didn't have to go so hard, but I really appreciate that they did. After this, the inventor of the suit shows up to give you the Seika Creamcast, which is what you use in this game to accept work, while in the last game it was a PC software you got on a floppy disk. So you accept your first job, which is more of a trial than anything else, and you head out into the streets. One immediate improvement with this game is that you're not super fucking slow outside of the superhero suit. So alongside not having to open a menu every time you want to do stuff, it just makes this game feel a lot faster immediately. Your first task is to deliver flyers that advertise the Rent-A-Hero service, and a remade version of the theme from the original game plays. Actually, most of the music in this game is from the original, but it's totally redone. Eventually, you get to Segata Sanshiro, who wants you to spar with him. Yeah, that's Segata from the fucking Sega Saturn ads. The mascot from the Sega Saturn is just in this game as a guy, and he teaches you how to fight. I love it. It's fucking awesome. He kicked my ass, but turns out he'll teach you new combos and stuff from time to time. The combat is a lot more enjoyable than the Mega Drive version. So in combat, your options are punch, but you can only have one combo equipped at a time, grab, and charge moves. Charge has 4 levels, and you apply a move to each level, but the higher charge moves use more battery. Level 1 charge moves are fun to throw in to mix things up, but the big finishers are really draining on the batteries, and you gotta be careful when you use them. I also love that you can throw enemies into others to knock them down, and if you knock someone into the air, they can fall onto the enemies and hurt them, and when enemies are airborne, you can also juggle them a bit, like a fighting game. It just feels really fun. As you keep handing out the flyers, you see some girl being harassed by a weirdo, and you gotta beat him up. And then she'll ask you what your superhero name is. So I named my guy Mr. Rent, because, you know, he's got rents to pay. Then you finish handing out flyers and accept your next job. In this game, you can get multiple jobs at a time and accept whichever you'd like. There's still linearity to the game, which is fine, but I enjoy having some more freedom to what I do and when. There are also random missions you can accept around the world that you have to go seek out yourself. Also, when buying batteries and stuff in this game, thanks to the ability to skip text boxes, it goes a lot faster to buy the stuff you need, especially if you need multiple items, which you do a lot. Another improvement in this game is giving you much more time before you have to pay the rent for using a suit. It got really annoying in the Mega Drive version, but here I don't mind it. And also the battery drains a lot slower, you have way more time, unless of course you use a lot of high charge moves. And again, just like the original game, the dialogue is very silly in places, and I love it. Are you the Grim Reaper? Is it my time already? Like, what the fuck, man? I'm also happy that the names of the people living in different houses appear when you stand outside their door. You don't have to manually check who lives there. Again, it just makes things easier and faster. Another nice feature is the ability to contact Mio, who gives you jobs and stuff on the fly, and she can check the status to remind you of your objective, which is very helpful. There's also advertisements in here for Choo Choo Rocket and Somebody Amigo. It's kind of fun to see, as well as this character from Space Channel 5. Speaking of ads, a lot of them are really goofy. Like this one. It's hard to make out everything it's saying, but what I can read is, strange girls, can they? Why were they born? The game might be silly, but unlike the Mega Drive game, which takes a bit to get serious, this game has more stuff like that sprinkled in. Like this kid who climbs a tower and is about to fall. When you get to the top and rescue him, he apologizes to his mom, saying he just wanted to get up high so he could reach the heavens to see his father again. Stuff like that really adds a lot to small missions like this. There's a part where you gotta rescue some people in a cave. This was in the original too, but here whenever you smash boulders, you gotta wait for him to hit it, and it takes some time, and some of them don't break, and sometimes when you try to punch a boulder, you'll be teleported to the opposite side. It's like they're expecting you to hit all the boulders from the direction that you entered the cave from. But if you get around them, you'll be teleported in front. It's really weird. It also just makes it kind of disorienting, but to be fair, this part doesn't take too long to get through, and at the end of it all, you manage to help out your fellow Rent-A-Hero named Salary Man, whose catchphrase is, be nice to salesmen of all things. Eventually, you start getting randomly stopped by thugs who want to beat you up. In the Mega Drive version, this got immediately annoying because the combat is so bad. Here, I don't mind it as much, but I still think it happens a bit more often than it should. If you lose these fights, you lose money and get sent to the hospital. But they're generally pretty easy, and the combat is fairly satisfying. It feels like a solid 3D beat 'em up. I also gotta point out this quiz you get at the school. One of the questions is, what year did the War of 1812 take place? I wonder. Getting further into the game, you have to deal with the evil shenanigans of a company called Narco, who stole a drug from another company that apparently makes you dance until you die. You find the guy who stole it for them, as he used the money he got from Narco to pay off his debt, but then they sprayed him with the drug because they didn't want to help them anymore. After giving him the antidote, you go to the Narco lab, getting by the security guard by giving him a porn magazine. You get in, fight the scientists, and one of them accidentally breaks a vial containing the gas. They all start dancing and you gotta heal them one by one. When you ask the old guy, he tells you, I'm dancing because I want to, don't bother me. This game is so goofy and I love it. Carrying old people where they need to go, helping Segata Sanshiro write a love letter, delivering pizza, defusing bombs, fighting bad guys. There's so much to do in this game. This game is fantastic. It's a decent beat 'em up with fun writing, varied missions, and a unique premise, and it knows when to get serious and when to give you those sadder moments. And this story just gets really wild, and there's a lot of twists and turns as you keep going. The end credits also shows pictures of our characters, but in the real world, doing real world stuff. It's very, very charming, I love it. It's a huge shame we never got it in the West. They were planning on localizing the Xbox port, and they had begun working on it, but it never came out. An early prototype of the English localization actually did leak. A lot of textures have been redone, but it was pretty clear from the leak that they hadn't gotten too far. We're so close to getting a translated version of this game, but it never happened, which is why I'm thankful that this fan translation finished the job. And that's where the franchise ends. It's a shame because I really like the premise. It could work well as a show too. Apparently in 2016 they were going to make a movie based on Rent-A-Hero, but it never happened. No news has come out since. But I think this is a series that could be worth bringing back. While I don't really recommend the Mega Drive game unless you're particularly interested in that one, the Dreamcast game I can definitely say is worth a go. Outside of it having a few too many random encounters, I don't really have much else to complain about. It's a really solid game, and it's definitely worth giving a try.